All right, we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to the green room video portion before the podcast starts. I'm Michael Reynolds here with Ryan Sterling. We're going to have a great conversation today about Ryan's new book. Ryan, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I actually just got my first copies in the mail yesterday.
All I have is a PDF. So you got
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was surprised that it came so soon. It's not available for purchase yet, but I got the advanced copies.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
I'll mention this as we kind of kick off here and get going, but I'm most of the way through it. I haven't finished it yet, but it's really good so far. I'm really loving it.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's a really easy read and packed full of just really, I love your style too. Just really good stuff. So
appreciate it. I call it a plane book. You can get on a flight in New York, fly to LA, and you can be done with it.
I love those kind of books. Very practical. Well, I see we have one live viewer at least, so that's a good time to say hello and to kind of get the podcast recording started. So you get, there's Jennifer. Jennifer says, what was that? So Jennifer, we are talking about Ryan's new book today. Ryan wrote a book called You're Making Other People Rich, and we're going to talk about some nuggets from the book today and just kind of get Ryan's thoughts and some practical advice pulling out of that book today. So glad you're here, Jennifer, and anyone else that wants to join. So all right, so let's kick off. We're going to, as always, we're going to start the podcast recording for the audio portion here, so stand by. Hey everyone, welcome to Wealth Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Reynolds, independent financial advisor and owner of Elevation Financial. Thanks for joining us today. We have got a guest in the house. Ryan Sterling has joined me today to talk about his new book, and it's going to be awesome. I'm loving the book. I'm excited about our conversation today. So Ryan, I'll do a quick intro for you here, but I want to say welcome first. So glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Good to be on.
So before I get to the official intro, I'll mention that I've known Ryan. We've been for about a year and a half, right? We've kind of been in this mastermind group for maybe a year and a half or so.
Yeah, probably a year. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Ryan and I are both members of XY Planning Network, which is a modern network for modern financial advisors. And we are in a small group consisting of five other advisors, actually five advisors counting me. And we meet weekly, and we really gotten to know each other really well and have a very intimate view of each other's businesses and practices, which has been awesome because I've learned a ton. I think all of us have learned a ton from each other. And it's a great mastermind and support group as well. So we've gotten to know each other, helped each other quite a bit. I know you've helped me a lot. And it's really good to have you on the show. You've been on the show as a group as well, but this is our first one-on-one interview. So
yeah, I've been on twice before. This is my first one solo.
Yeah, love it. Love it. So let's jump in. Let me do an intro for you here. Tell people all about you, and then we'll talk about insights from your new book. So so for everyone who's watching and listening, Ryan Sterling is the owner of Future You Wealth. So Ryan's a founder of Future You Wealth. He's a holistic wealth coach, speaker, and published author of the new book, You're Making Other People Rich, which we will get to today. Over the past few years, he's been featured in Business Insider, CNN Money, Huffington Post, discussing his knowledge of business or building wealth. And as a financial advisor, he challenges and inspires people to get real about their life, which is one thing I love about you, Ryan, is your real talk approach. It's awesome. Guiding them to make necessary changes and defining what wealth truly means to them. So as a part of his mission, Ryan has taken years of formal training, setbacks, life lessons, successes, and used his own life reinvention to fuel simple yet effective lessons to help anyone live a life of true abundance and wellness. All right, Ryan, I'm excited. You've written a book. That's phenomenal. Most people, they dream of writing a book. They never get around to it, myself included. I feel like I've got a book there someday, but I haven't written it yet. But you got it done. You wrote a book, and like I said, I'm about most of the way through it. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I've been reading it here, and I'm about probably 80% through it, and I love it. It's a great read. It's phenomenal. It's really easy to read, and it really fits my style because it's super actionable and has a lot of really practical, plain spoken insights. So I thought today what we would do is first hear a little bit more about you, give us your background, anything I've missed out on explaining, and then talk about a few key insights from the book to give our listeners some takeaways, some practical advice to kind of sink their teeth into before we go. So let's talk about you first. So I gave the intro, the official intro, but what else would you like our audience to know about you? What's your what's your fun fact, backstory, or a boring fact? Some people say, hey, let's give us a boring fact. Some people say, hey, my favorite color is purple, or I'm wearing green socks today. You know, what's that about you?
Yeah, it's so first of all, I just want to say thank you for your kind words. As someone who's a practitioner in the industry, your words mean a lot. So it's everything you said was the intention of the book. So I really appreciate all of that. So fun fact about me, it's funny. I was asked this question recently and I blanked, and then I gave this answer, and they were like, "I can't believe you blanked on this answer." So this is going to be my go-to now answer for that question. So when I was 10 years old. So let me take a step back. I found out recently that I have a SAG card, so the Screen Actors Guild. I just found this out literally a month and a half ago. And the reason I have it is back when I was 10 years old, I was cast in the movie A League of Their Own. Wow. Penny Marshall, Madonna, I didn't meet Tom Hanks or Madonna in any of those. I didn't meet Penny Marshall. But at any rate, I was cast in the movie. You do not see me. My scene was cut, but nonetheless, I still got paid. So I knew that I filmed the movie. It was about 2 weeks of filming, and my family were just picked out of a random lot. And my sisters didn't make the cut, but I ended up making it. And so I remember doing the filming. I remember getting paid for it. But I literally just found out about 2 months ago that I have a SAG card.
Nice. That's a fun. That's a really fun fact. So there you go.
That was the beginning and the end of my acting career, though.
All right, awesome. Well, with that, let's kick off a conversation about what's in the book itself. Again, I'm really enjoying it. So I'm going to give you kind of a two-part question that is, I think, answerable in kind of one discussion, which is, what prompted you to write this book, and why do you think we are making other people rich?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I wrote the book that I wish I would have read 10, 15 years ago. I've been a practicing financial advisor for 15 years, working at some of the larger firms in the industry, and more or less focusing exclusively in the high net worth space of the wealth management industry. So, we're talking about people who have north of 5 to 10 million in investable assets. So the clients that I've worked with over the years are everything from retirees, business owners. I've worked with a lot of legacy families, inherited wealth. And so number one is just interesting from a professional standpoint, having just a really interesting vantage point into money and wealth in some of the wealthiest families in the world. Just seeing that, there's money as a resource. But then also, though, just seeing how money can really impact families and how money can be a controlling force, how money can lead to a strain in relationships, how money, you can have all the money in the world, but actually be someone that lives a very poor existence. So it was really interesting just to see the various case studies that I've experienced, the live case studies that I've experienced over the years with money and people's relationships with money. But then I think about my own personal story with respect to, I was kind of the classic, the high achiever, just checking off all the boxes. But every time I'd make an extra 30 grand, I'd spend an extra 35 grand. And I was the classic victim of what's known as lifestyle creep. And lifestyle creep is basically when your income goes up, it becomes an invitation to develop more expensive tastes and habits. You can live in a bigger place. You can drive a nicer car. You can join fancier clubs. You can go to more expensive restaurants. And I hit this one point in my life where, so go all the way back to when I was 25 and I was new in the industry. I had one of those moments where you go to the printer and you're going through a print job and you inadvertently pick up somebody else's print job. And there was a guy who was about maybe 12 to 15 years older than me. And I inadvertently picked up his W-2 that he'd printed out. And when I looked at it, I looked at the numbers and my eyes were popping out of my head. And I said, man, when I hit that number, that's going to be when I made it. Everything in my life is going to be perfect. And then I put it back because it wasn't mine, and I didn't tell anyone about it, and I just moved on with my day. But I had that number in my head that is the number that I want to hit. So then fast forward 10 years later, and I'm at a kind of a low point in my life. I'm moving forward in my career, but things just aren't going well. I'm not nearly where I'm not where I should be from a savings perspective. I'm not really feeling excited anymore. I'm not feeling energized. I'm not feeling challenged. And it was one of those days where I was at my desk, and it was on my birthday, and my birthday's in December, so this is at the end of the year. And I just had one of those moments where I'm like, let me just see what my income is going to be like for the year. So I pull up my ADP and I pull up my income report, and it hit me in that moment that I'm going to reach that number that 10 years earlier I decided was my I made it number. And I looked at myself and I looked at where I was, and I was so far from where I thought I would be when I hit that number. And I had one of those moments where I looked 10 years behind, and I looked at the excitement and energy that I had. And then I looked 10 years in the future, and I looked at some of my colleagues and people who were 10 to 15 years ahead of me. And I just looked at the lives they were living, and looking at their relationship with money. And I just decided at that point, like, this is not who I want to be. I'm not living a life of intention. I'm not using money as a resource. I'm letting money control me. And that's when I really stopped. I reevaluated my life. And I really then, the method that's in this book of the awareness, accountability, action, the 3-part steps, is that I realized that even though I had all the technical expertise, I had all the knowledge, I had the experience, I hadn't defined what my relationship with money needed to be. And I realized in that moment that managing money on the personal side, there's so much more to it than just having the technicals down. It's developing, what life do you want to live? What's your best, most intentional life? And how do you use money as a resource to get you there? And I was doing the exact opposite. I was letting money being a controlling force, and I was letting society and these shoulds and this life that was designed for me, I was letting that control me as opposed to the other way around. So that's when I decided to, number one, a big goal of mine was I needed more of a challenge in my life. I needed something that excited me. And that was when I started the process of looking into what it was like what it would be like to start my own firm. But that's also then when I started writing this book. So in a way, the book was the book I wish I would have read 10 years ago, but it's also the book that really became the foundation for this firm that I started and I'm running today.
Love it. I'm sure a lot of people can see and hear themselves in that story as well. It's not a unique, I mean, it is everyone's unique story, but it's not uncommon for people to have that realization that they think that the milestone they reach is going to make everything great, and it's not quite what they thought. So
that's right. I see that a lot of my clients today.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on a few key points from the book. Obviously, we're going to encourage people to read the book, and at the end, we'll talk about kind of where to find it, how to get it. But I want to talk about a few key points from the book. Jennifer, thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer said she agrees. Yes, seen a lot of people in that situation as well, and can agree with that. So thanks, Jennifer. These are the comments coming in on Facebook Live, by the way. So in the book, you mentioned you talk about how we're being exploited financially. Tell me a little bit more about how we're being exploited and how we can avoid that.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about so I'll give a quick example. So I was talking to a friend not too long ago who is in the startup world, and he has a consumer brand that he's trying to launch, and he's trying to raise money and he's having a difficult time. And the feedback he was getting from this one venture capital firm that he was working with was, you need to reduce the friction points between the customer, the consumer, and then them actually buying your product. So he's like, I really need to figure out how I reduce the friction. And I use that example because when you think about the shopping experience today and how we're being exploited, we are constantly bombarded with brand messages. And the messages are out there to tell us that we are losing out on something or that we have less than somebody else. So we're told and we're made to feel like we live in this place of scarcity, and that the only way we can get out of scarcity is to consume. And again, just look around at your day-to-day. Look at your social media feed, when you're watching TV, when you're driving, everywhere you go, you're getting hit with these brand messages that are trying to get you to consume. But I use that example about the friction points because two things have happened. Number one, we're being told that we live in this place of scarcity and that we need to consume, and if we don't, we're missing out on something or we have less than somebody else. But then number two is there's a system now that's been designed where the friction points have been completely eliminated to almost nothing. So what do I mean by this? Think about, I mean, just go back in time. You can go, decades back, and think about the process of what you would have to go through to buy a pair of shoes. If you wanted to go buy a pair of shoes, you had to go through the process of, do you have cash on you? Yes or no? If no, you have to drive to a bank, you have to wait in line, you actually have to get cash from a teller, okay? Exactly. Then you have to drive to a store. You have to dig through inventory. Do they have your size? Do they have what you want? If not, then go to another store. If not, then go to another store. I mean, think about the process of buying a pair of shoes. That could be a 3 to 6 hour event, depending on if a store had what you're looking for or not. And then think about, just again, I mentioned using cash. Think about cash as a constraint. You can only spend the cash that you have on you. But with each passing decade, the friction points have been reduced to the point now where you can get an alert on your watch, press one button on your phone, and you can have 30 pairs of shoes delivered a day later with free shipping. This is an intentionally designed system where, again, the messages are, you're missing out on something, you have less than somebody else. Oh, and number two, we're going to make spending your money as easy as possible, to the point where you're no longer saying, I need a pair of shoes. I'll see you in 3 hours. I'm going to go out shopping. I'm going to find these shoes that I need. Instead, you're just going on in your day to day and you get a push notification that the shoes that were in one of your carts are now on sale, and you press one button and you can buy it. So this is all about the exploitation to get your money from you as easy as possible.
So as someone with in a previous life, a marketing background, this is absolutely true, because the whole premise around marketing strategy is to reduce friction, is to make sure that you make it so easy for someone to opt into something so you can make the sale. And as a financial advisor, what I do the opposite with my clients now. I basically say, hey, what are some ways we can increase, and you do the same thing. How can we increase friction? So for example, it's, hey, instead of lumping all your money into one account, I love Jennifer's comments today. She says, I'm hiding.
we tend to do that to our audience.
Facebook Live comments, Jennifer's saying I'm hiding, and she's a marketer, so she's not going way back. I tell my clients, hey, instead of lumping all your money into one account, let's set it up into separate bank accounts, so that if you have to dip into your savings account, you have to do a wait for 2 or 3 days for that transfer to come through. It's in a whole separate place, a whole separate app, a whole separate card, a whole separate account to log into. If it's in the same account, it's all just right there. You can just move money around. It's super easy, which is convenient, but convenient in a negative way sometimes, because you have no friction between that money you've set aside for something and the money you want to spend now. So increasing friction as financial advisors is often a tool that you and I both use, I know, with our clients, to help them stick to behaviors they want to stick to. So
exactly. And again, this is not to say that retailers and marketers are bad people. They're great people. This is their job. And there are a lot of benefits that come with a more seamless shopping experience. Like, I don't want to spend 3 to 6 hours to buy a pair of shoes. That said, it is an intentionally designed system. So one thing I talk about in this book is that we need to fight an intentionally designed system with intention. And that's intentionally adding those friction points back between us and spending our money. And it could even be as simple as creating a rule that before you check out online, walk away for 5 minutes, walk away for 10 minutes, whatever you need to do. Just create a little bit of space. And another thing, and I do this with a number of my clients, is if you end up walking away from something, just delete it out of your cart. Because here's the thing, data is so valuable today. And if there's something that's in your cart that you're storing at a later date, it's one of those things, like, so think about if you're actually physically going shopping and you pull something off the shelf and you decide to then put it back and then you leave the store. That's forgotten about. You're not remembering that a week, 2 weeks later. And once it's forgotten about, it's out of sight, out of mind, you're not buying it. But when you leave something in your cart and there's that data trail of, the retailer knowing, oh, wait, okay, you wanted this at some point in time, they're going to find you. Exactly. They are going to find you, and they're going to get you when you're most vulnerable.
Yeah. So talk to me about attachment. Another concept you talk about in the book is attachment. And I love the story you went through about the guy who thought the private plane was like his level of making it. So how does attachment play into this, and how does it kind of sabotage our future goals and dreams?
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, in our society, we are ripe for attachments. I mean, it happens from a very young age. We're attached to, our identity. We're attached to what other people think about us. We're attached to, our careers. We're attached to our past. We have, if you think about so I call this the high achiever trap, where if you're someone who you've been a high achiever your entire life, and you're always hitting the next threshold, you're always hitting the next level, you're attached to that feeling of always hitting that next milestone, that next benchmark in life. And it's one of those where it's so easy to fall into, and I'll just use I live in New York City, and I'll just use a classic example. And I apologize for the attorneys out there. I tend to pick on attorneys a lot. I have a lot of attorney friends. They're all great people. But let me just use this example, though. I know so many people who they go through, they're great students in high school. They then go to a quote unquote great college. They then say, okay, what do the high achievers do after college? They go to law school. Okay, now you're in a competitive law school environment. Okay, then what do you do if you're a competitive law school student? Well, you're going to get the biggest paycheck possible. Okay, well, what does that mean? Okay, that's a corporate law gig. Okay, so next thing you know, you're working a corporate law job. You're working 100-hour weeks. And then the next rung up is partner. And then you're fighting to get to the partner status. And it's one of those things where you're attached to, again, the identity of being a high achiever, and always attached to what that next carrot is in front of you. So then you think about, okay, with that attachment on the career side, so then what attachments do you have from the consumption side that is parallel with the career? Well, then and I talk about this in the book, where if you're attached to your success, your worth, and your identity to how much money you have, it's interesting in the sense that let's say, for example, you're attached to fitness, and fitness being a proxy for your self-worth. People can see if you're physically fit, right? It's easy to show off if you're super muscular or super athletic. But if your worth and if your ego is attached to how successful other people see you to be, it's a faux pas to walk around with a t-shirt broadcasting your net worth on it, right? You just don't do that. But we do it in other ways. We do it in the cars we drive, the houses that we live in, the clubs that we attend, the places we vacation, the accessories that we wear. We do it on a day-to-day basis to, again, signal. And by the way, this isn't to say don't consume nice things. I like a lot of nice things, but it's because I like them, not because of the attachment I have with respect to what they say about my identity. So it's one of those things with attachments where if you're attached to what people think about you, or attached to an identity, or attached to money being a proxy of your self-worth, it's one of those where you are constantly figuring out ways to signal to your cohort of how successful you are. And an example that I give in the book here with a private plane is that it never ends. And there's a client that I worked with who, he was as wealthy as can be. $20 million liquid. He had a couple of houses, cars paid off, kids in college. He had it made. He was late 50s. He could easily retire. He was a president of a mid-sized law firm at a region outside of New York, and he hated his job. You talk to those people who say they hate their job, and they kind of don't mean it. They kind of actually really love it. He truly hated his job, and he wanted to quit. And we were in one of our meetings, said, look, man, you have 20 million liquid. Like you can retire tomorrow. You don't ever have to work ever again. He had a son who was a Division I tennis player who he missed most of his high school matches because he was working, and he really wanted to travel to watch his son play tennis. And I said, look, you can travel, you can watch your son play tennis, you can do whatever you want with your time. And he goes, I can't. I said, why? He goes, I don't have enough money for a private plane. I said, why do you need a private plane? He goes, everybody in my cohort, all the successful CEOs that I represent on a day-to-day basis, they all have private planes. Everybody at this one exclusive club I'm a part of, they all have private planes. I'm the only one who doesn't. And I'm not going to be successful until I have my own private plane. And I'm probably going to need $70-80 million saved to get it. So here's a guy who, again, $20 million liquid. He had all of the ability in the world to retire and do whatever he wanted with his time. But he was attached to the idea that a private plane was the definition and the proxy for his success. And it sounds crazy. And I know most people hear the story and they're like, how can that be? But we all have it. We all have it at different levels. And I guarantee you, we could bring attachments in any one of our lives that we have and show someone who is in a completely different situation, and they could see what we're attached to and they could say, that's absolutely crazy. So just bring that to the surface. That's an extreme example, but I think we all have attachments, and it's really important to look through to see, are the attachments controlling you, or are you living the life that you've actually designed?
That's a little bit heartbreaking to hear, being able to watch your son play tennis and travel and do that, and you could, but the attachment is keeping you from doing that.
Yeah. I mean, he was the high achiever, right? And he was so attached to being in this particular cohort and what that meant about who he was and his value that he couldn't see through it. It was completely blinding. Again, it's an extreme example, but I know myself, I've fallen into that trap many times.
Yeah.
Still do.
Well, I know I want to make sure we are mindful of time. And I know when we get to gamification of spending, which is kind of where some practical stuff comes in, but I also want to talk briefly about your thoughts on money as a resource. You have a whole chapter on money as a resource in the book. So tell me what that means.
Yeah, I mean, money is this amazing resource that we have. And I've said this a number of times, to live our best, most intentional life. And what I mean by that is, I'm a big fan of designing what's the life that you want to live. How do you want to spend your time? What gets you excited? What brings you love and connection and brings you peace? And define that first, right? What does your perfect day look like? What does your perfect life look like? Don't think about money for a second. Design it without money. Then once you're able to design that and whiteboard that out, then use money as this resource that allows you to live your best, most intentional life. Again, we tend to do the opposite. We tend to look at the money we have and the design, try to live a life based on the money that we have at our disposal, as opposed to the other way around. Let's design our life and then use money as a resource to live that best, most intentional life.
Makes sense. All right. So I love how you talked about, Jennifer has a comment. Let's pop that on screen here. Jennifer says travel, but I feel bad spending money on it.
But I think that's a great example. And I think one thing that I think financial advisors get a bad rap on, and I say this all the time, is that, people say, oh, well, I want to be able to live my life. I want to do the things that I enjoy doing. And I think using money as a resource, I think that's a really good example, Jennifer, because it's, saving and budgeting isn't about saying no. It's about saying yes to the things that add a lot of value to your life and no to the things that don't.
Makes sense. All right. Let's talk about my favorite part in the book so far, which is gamification of spending. So here's some practical insights I want to share, or have you share with our audience here. So you talked about gamification of spending, and these are kind of behavior hacks and how you can kind of hack your spending to align with goals that you want to achieve. And there's things like, you mentioned the no spending day, cash week, happy hour month, just say no month. Can you walk us through some of these gamifications that you've talked about?
Mm-hmm. So I'm a competitive person, and a lot of the people I work with have an innate competitive drive. And I was thinking about this, just seeing how successful Peloton has been with their retention rates, and seeing that people are doing really well losing weight on Peloton, but it's because they created a game out of it. They made exercise fun. And I was thinking about, how can we make spending and saving fun? So I thought about, how can we create spending and savings games? So I just came up with a handful that I use with my clients, and I myself use on a regular basis. So a couple of them that I used is a no spending day. And this is a day where you set the intention before the day, where you say, I am not going to spend any money today, not a penny. So yes, you need to do some pre-planning. You need to make sure that you have meals prepared in advance and all that stuff. But the reason the no spending day works is it stops you from making those small impulse purchases. So when you're walking down the street and you're inclined to maybe stop into the juice bar and spend $11 on a juice, or go get a coffee, or your checkout, you pass by a deli and you just want a quick snack, whatever it may be. By having a no spending day, you're setting that barrier, you're creating that friction point where you're saying no to spending for the day, and it's going to stop you from making those small impulse purchases that add up over time. And it's a lot of fun, and it's a game because it forces you to be really resourceful, to say, even I'll play these games every now and then. I'll be like, okay, I need to get really creative with dinner. Like, what's in our cabinet? What's in our pantry? And you think about doing that. Number one, you're using up things that otherwise might go to waste. But number two, do, it's fun being resourceful. So that's what I do with a no spending day. A cash week, and it's kind of hard to do right now, but before COVID, I would think about, okay, how much do I typically spend in a week on just kind of the random, my food, random shopping, whatever it may be, and let me reduce it by 25%. So, for example, if I'm just making this up, if I spend $200 in a week on just random stuff, let me reduce it. Let me get $150 out of the ATM, and $150 is going to be all the cash I have for the week. And again, it's a game. It's fun. It's to see, okay, how can I make this last? How can I stretch $1? Another one that I use is a happy hour week, or a happy hour month, I should say, where we challenge ourselves just to find happy hour deals. I love going out. I love being around people. I love being in an ambiance. It's been a challenge, obviously, during these COVID times. But before that, it was a lot of fun to go to new places and try new restaurants that have happy hour pricing. You get the same ambiance in terms of being around people, being out of your home, but you spend a lot less money. So it's anything you can do. These are just a couple of examples to get your brain moving, but anything you can do where you can make a game out of saving money. My favorite's a no spending day. I try to do it a lot. And it's one of those where it's like, it's actually kind of fun. And it's actually really empowering to say, you know what, I don't need to spend money today in order to have a really good day.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see the comments, Ryan, but Derek popped in and said, hello. And he said, no spending week could be a challenge. So that's a day you're talking about, but Derek extend that to a week, it sounds like. So
that could be, that's a really interesting one. I actually think I probably have done it during these COVID times. Yeah, I think about get groceries in advance for the week, and really, you're probably good.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. We're glad you're here. Keep up on those comments if you have questions or comments. So, this is awesome stuff. Is there anything else? These are the points I wanted to focus on from the book and just kind of draw out. But are there any other insights that you would like to leave our audience with before we kind of get to wrap up here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if I could distill this book down into just a simple framework. It's the path to building wealth and how to make yourself rich as opposed to other people rich. It's really an equation of intention. Be intentional about your money. Are you spending in a way that's getting you closer to your best life, or is it taking you away? So it's intention plus ownership. So with your savings, buy assets that go up in value over time. Be an owner of capital, own stocks, real estate, the assets that work for you even when you sleep. So it's one of those intention plus ownership. What's that?
This is why I don't like spending a bunch of money on cars. I refuse to spend a bunch of money on a car because they don't go up in value.
Exactly.
Like, the most basic, pre-owned, recent but pre-owned car I can get because it's a way to get from point A to point B. I just don't have attachment to cars, and they plummet in value. So.
Exactly. And we tend to do the opposite. So it's one of those where it's an easy equation, intention plus ownership, but we tend to do the opposite, where we spend in a very unintentional way to acquire depreciating assets. Mm-hmm. So again, whether it's the person is always buying a new car that again is going down in value right after they take it's a very expensive left turn, or the clients that I have that have $100,000 worth of clothes and shoes in their closet. And it's funny because people, when you talk about the intention and the ownership by appreciating assets, so let's use stocks for an example. People always tell me like, oh, but stocks, they're so risky. And it's amazing when you hear people say stocks are risky. There's definitely volatility with stocks, but it's interesting when you think about the stock market. If you go back 30 years on a calendar year basis, the stock market is down around 30% of calendar years. Okay. So in a 10-year period, roughly 3 out of every 10 years is a down year for the market where you'll lose money in being invested in the stock market. But if you say, no, that's way too risky, I'm not going to buy stocks because I can't be down 3 in every 10 years. So you know what? I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to buy clothes. I'm going to buy shoes. I'm going to buy accessories. Well, all of that stuff that you bought instead, that goes down in value 100% of calendar years. So it's like, when you think about that, how do you think about risk now, right? So it's one of those where, again, this book, it's really all about, the first part of the book is about developing more intention about the life you want to live and how money can get you to live your best, most intentional life. And then the second part of the book is then about ownership. So then how do you take the savings from being more intentional and how do you acquire appreciating assets? Instead of buying the new iPhone every time it comes out, own Apple as a company.
That's really insightful. I love the way you laid it out. That's really kind of a crystal clear way of looking at it. The stock market, 3 out of 10 years, it sounds risky, but it's much more risky to buy things that depreciate. And that's what we do every day. A lot of us we can hold the piece of clothing in our hand. We can sit in the car and it feels good. An investment like a mutual fund or a stock is out there in the ether somewhere and we don't understand it. But yet we're making a decision that is the opposite of what we say we want. That's very interesting. Really good insight.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. I want to thank Jennifer and Derek, who've been popping in questions and comments. For those in the audio podcast version of this, the reason we're talking about this is we're on Facebook Live a day before this goes out on Tuesdays at 1:30 Eastern. So that's why we're seeing comments come in from those on Facebook. So we appreciate that. All right. So I want to wrap up with a couple things. One, I want to ask you my typical question I ask all guests. And then after that, I want to get to where people can find you and the book, definitely. But let me go ahead and ask my usual closing question here, which is, what does wealth mean to you, Ryan?
I think wealth to me is living the life you want to live and making sure that you're touching upon all the areas of wealth in your life. So when I think about what does wealth mean for me, it's spending time with the people who are important to me, not losing sight of that. It's having adventure in my life, making sure that I'm challenging myself, making sure that I'm always investing in areas of personal growth. And again, using money as that resource to get there. So I'm big on, and I talk about this in the book, on all the areas of wealth in all of our lives. And I see my wealthy life in making sure that I'm hitting upon all of those areas of wealth and that I'm not losing sight in any one of those because I'm too singularly focused on one part of my life.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. All right, let's talk about where people can find you and the book. So you have two websites. One is futureyouwealth.com, which is your financial advisory business. And you also have a personal website, which is ryansterling.com, which is kind of where you're driving people for the book and your podcast, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I want to mention it. You have a really good podcast you just launched as well called Take the Next Step. It is really good.
Oh, thank you.
The book is really good. The podcast is really good. I just want to personally say you are absolutely crushing it with what you are teaching people about money and wealth. And I love it. And I cannot wait for more episodes and for more people to find the book. So
it means a lot. Thank you.
Future You Wealth. Yeah, absolutely. futureyouwealth.com and ryansterling.com. Are those the best places to find you and to find the book and the podcast?
Yeah, they are. The book's going to be, so here's for the people watching this live. So the book is going to be on Amazon. I think Barnes & Noble as well, but Amazon's probably your best bet. So it's out on September 29th. You're Making Other People Rich. And then find me on LinkedIn. I'm D. Ryan Sterling on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, Ryan Sterling. And go to ryansterling.com. That's where everything is now being housed at ryansterling.com. Future Your Wealth is my business website. I'm super active on that as well, but ryansterling.com is probably the best spot.
Jennifer popped a comment in saying, dang it, I have too many podcasts. So just delete one and make room for Ryan. But don't delete Jennifer. Don't delete mine.
Take the next step with Ryan Sterling. Yeah.
With Ryan Sterling. And I also want to say, just personally, I love the fact that two technically competing financial advisors can come on and have a conversation like this. That's what I love about our mastermind group that we're in, is that, all of us are technically competitors, but everyone's different and everyone relates differently to people. So some people, love the vibe that you, thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer says, never, not going to leave my podcast. Thank you. Some people are going to love your vibe. And some people are, jive more with me or someone else. And so there's room for all of us to have these kinds of discussions. And I love the fact that, there are like-minded advisors like you that are willing to have these discussions as peers. And I'm really glad that you've become a friend as well. And everyone in our group has become a friend in our mastermind community as well. So glad you were on the show today. So anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot. I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate your audience for listening. And no, you're doing amazing work out there. And I echo your words 100%. It's great to have other advisors as people who are resource mentors, friends. And I really appreciate your ongoing support.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We appreciate you being part of our community. You can find me online at elevationfinancial.com as always. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. All right. The audio recording is off. We'll hang out for a minute or two here on video for those who are still with us. So I know Jennifer and Derek popped in. If you have any other questions for Ryan, this is kind of the post-recording green room time. So, pop those questions in. Jennifer and Derek both had some great comments. Derek, again, that no spending week challenge is kind of interesting. I know Derek personally, he's a very high achiever, so I can see him pulling it off. Yeah. So if you have any other questions you want to pose to Ryan or any other comments, definitely get them in right this moment because we're about to wrap up, but we'll stick around if anyone's still there. But Ryan, thank you. It's been awesome. So looking forward to seeing the book launched officially out there on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, through your website. So we'll shout that at one more time, futureyouwealth.com and ryansterling.com. So Stephanie popped in to say thank you both. So thanks, Stephanie. We appreciate you being here as well. Glad you were here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So with that, we will end the broadcast and say have a great day to everyone. And thanks, Ryan. Hey, you have a great day too.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.